Hello, everybody, and welcome to our next session, which is an ideation workshop with Jay Harrill. I am Chloe Lewis, Create-Based Guild co-facilitator, and you can call me a near adoption specialist. I'll just do my best over the next 2 weeks and beyond to kind of help you get onboarded and learn about all this new near Web3 technology. Jay is the communication manager over at QuantStamp, and she will be leading us through this ideation session today. So if you have any questions about what is ideation, how do I get started, what are my next steps in, kind of trying to bring a project together from what's in your mind, maybe down onto paper, Jay will be helping us through that. I actually have a quick video that I've been meaning to show for a couple of days now. It was created by one of the artists in the Create-Based Guild, and it kind of just is a little Create-Based Guild intro. So I'm going to see if we can get it to play, and then we'll have Jay take over. So we'll see how this goes. Okay, let's see. It loops for a bit. We'll see how it goes. So that was just a quick run through. It's a snippet of our Create-Based intro video. It's not completely done yet, but that was actually a proposal. Someone from our Create-Based Guild inputted input to our DAO. They got paid out 100 near for that, for what they've created so far, and they'll continue building. But so as you get involved, that could be one of your hackathon projects, ensuring that the guilds and the ecosystem have hype videos to get them started. So Jay, feel free to please take it away and get us started. You can intro yourself a little more as well.
Hello, yes, my name is Jay, and I work with QuantStamp, and I'm going to help with people with ideation here. And so if you have any questions, please, just feel free to raise your hand and that sort of stuff, and we're going to go through it. But my goal today is to both introduce some design thinking in when you're proposing an idea to the Bounty DAOs, but also kind of helped maybe direct or shift what is needed in terms of people ideating on in this space as a whole. And as Chloe said, that Near is accepting applications for not just Near, but other solutions, that sort of stuff. So if we think of the whole cryptocurrency space, this is kind of more applicable towards that. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Screen option.
If you, there's a little square with an arrow pointing up. Yes, and that will help you share your screen. And if your screen's minimized, it might not show on the available tabs. So you'll have to actually unminimize your screen before selecting it.
Okay. Let me see. Oh, I think I need to share the PDF. So I'm just going to go ahead and get that. Didn't realize that was the case, but.
Yeah, you should be able to do either share your tab or share PDF, whichever one. So if you hit share screen to share your browser tab, it'll allow you to share your entire screen or just share your window.
Okay, let me. Okay, and here we go. So.
Yes, we can see your screen. Perfect.
Awesome. So ideation workshop. So one of the concepts that we have been talking a lot about here at QuantStamp is this idea of a digital nation. And I think what it's it harkens back to many different thinkings around Web3 and many different approaches like open value systems and stuff. And we're seeing these develop now more and more. You have a Discord, you have a project, you have reward systems, maybe you have a governance thing. We'll get into that in a minute. But we're seeing them pop up and more. And on aggregate, they're all together creating this space. So when we're thinking about ideations within this, obviously, your idea may not fit within what we're talking about here, but a lot of the ideas are going to be these types of digital nations. So let's get into it. So of course, Web 1 was very passive content. Web 2 was very interactive content plus users. And so Web 3 is moving away from centralized systems like Google and Amazon, but also more than that, also more in not just you're going and a platform is feeding off of your data. Rather, you are contributing to the platform's growth and the platform itself in a more of a community. And so these self-organized borderless Web3 communities or digital nations are being built from the ground up. Primary focus is on community. Profit is often secondary, although right now we're seeing a lot of profit-oriented ones, and we'll get into that in a minute. There's an equalizing effect for opportunities for people all over the world to partake in early stage product development and equity financing. So early examples include Sensorica, OVN models, open value network. Models apply to open and decentralized networks. Idea is to interact with other organizations as a collective, highly adaptable, fully decentralized, and governed through distributed decision-making processes and resource allocation. Its early failures was more due to maybe a lack of experience of people with working in flat managed systems. And also they're better when there's many other collectives around it, which we see now with composability. Because then on aggregate, they can all work together. But essentially the idea is you have a collective that can interact with market operators through an exchange firm. Maybe it's like an LLC or some sort of foundation, and it's essentially routing funding to the DAO, well, to the OVN in this case, which funds public open source opt-in development. And then those products through this system is then put outwards. And then you can have people taking multiple roles where they're an active member, they're developer, they're gaining monetary value from the system, from what they're building, and then at the end of the day, being able to sell externally to other interactions. Of course, these systems were very complex, especially with existing legal landscapes. It makes this process very slow. We're seeing with smart contracts, we're able to actually make that a lot more horizontal in process and minimize a lot of these issues and be able to grow this much quicker, much fuller. So a great example is, say, SushiSwap, right? So the core product, the value prop is their AMM, right? And there's services and stuff, and they're all building towards this AMM. They all coordinate in Discord, which is a tool, Commons tool, and they use Snapshot for governance votes, other Snapshot tools, other Commons tools. And of course, they have public-facing docs, so anyone can look at it and be able to coordinate and start organizing within the system without actually asking anyone. They can just jump in the Discord, read some docs, and find a spot and fit. And if they do really well, or if they be able to produce value, then the community itself, some of the people who are maybe more internal day to day with the project might find it fit to hire them on, which in this case they're actually getting more sustainable salary in this case, when normally maybe you're grabbing bounties, or you're grabbing little bits of funding here and there, or you're just producing and then you're getting sushi rewards, which then can go back into the product itself. And then that, of course, is all around the sushi community with participants. And then what's viewable is via crypto Twitter. And that itself is just one part of a much larger system that is what we're talking about in terms of Web3, these digital nations. And in this case, it's an exchange in what was defined here with the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis on the protocol layer. But in reality, this is like the decentralized finance layer, right? It's ultimately where many being able to maintain liquidity across tokens is maintained by this community, essentially, in this one instance. And of course, that's sitting on the platform that is ETH, which has its own, which in and of itself is an asset, which is then of course traded against BTC, which is its own sort of hedge asset. So you have this big ecosystem, and in this case for Near, much of the same thing would be the same. So you would have different layers, and also I believe there's a lot of interoperability with ETH. So the use value of ETH and Near are usable to a wide swath of these different protocol, like these different applications and different DeFi ideas. So we go a little bit further down, and maybe we have an idea. So I'm going to be using, for this ideation system section, I'm going to be using an example, actually an idea that I've been thinking about, but I think it's a great example that I think is a really great template for a lot of things. So, let's say we have a solution that we need to come to. It's like, first of all, what is a good problem to tackle, right? What is a good problem? And why should we care? Well, okay, sometimes there's a clear issue that, you and in your community is faced with, and you're trying to solve it. Maybe you just are trying to find a problem to tackle, and you don't know whether it's a good problem or not. In both instances, what you want to do. Oh, is there a question?
I don't think so. Might
I'm
be coming from your side.
Oh. I don't think it is. Oh, maybe it is.
There we
Okay.
go. Seems like it
Yeah.
went down. No worries.
Okay, yeah, it was. My bad. What is a good idea, right? Well, in both, and when you're exploring the problem space, it's like, how do you define that? Well, you want to think about what solutions exist, tools around you for composability, but mainly you want to do very simple things. You want to look, you want to listen, and you want to observe, right? Look to your own community, identify what the group's universal need is to build around, a shared vision of equality. This could be something simple in my example that I'm showing here. Most trans women need access to electrolysis. If you never knew that, it's something that exists, right? And it's not typically covered by health insurance. because it's considered elective. And the reality is, if you zoom out, especially with Canadian health insurance funding models, is it kind of falls outside of big tent funding, right? There's a smaller pool of people that this is a genuine need, but because it's not, say, a broken leg, the amount of specialists under broken leg, right? When the reduction in funding, it's not, most doctors can cope a little bit, but a little bit of reduction in funding in big tent models, because people are just looking at the end number, it ends up cutting out a lot of smaller services that people are reliant on. So this is an example of like where a community has a shared specific need that isn't being addressed, or it's very hard to address with very large funding models. So if we look at this example, it's like, okay, well, how do we fund electrolysis for a group of trans women? Well, maybe our group of trans women are a community that could also build. It's like, okay, well, how do we fund there? Well, we need to get money from over here, and we need to put it towards these services. So in this model, users with just a universal incentive, which is money, in this case, maybe Ethereum or near, they're not shared. There's no virtuous needs, but they like perpetuals. So they're on DYDX, and they're just playing the perpetuals market. Well, okay. Those fees, a portion of those fees could then go into funding Pool Together. Now, and if you've looked into Pool Together, it's really interesting because it's able to maintain a level of funding, and then via compound interest is able to still continue to provide external funding. So now we have a source of funding, a way to pool, and then you can add some sort of semi-randomized smart matching model that then can provide funding to maybe those in need first, but then at the same time incentivize users of that community to also contribute to that pool. And so now what you have is you actually have a community that has a very specific virtuous need that keeps everyone together, that you can then form a little digital nation around. So, you have your Discord where they have the same virtuous incentives. And then maybe a small community DAO where maybe there's a token or something that is able to fund development within this, that ultimately goes to build this little model itself. Now, this is really big. So this is really big, right? This is a lot of work. This is years of work, maybe months in crypto, but depending on how big or small or visible or how well it's marketed, it really would depend on how many people are able to contribute to this. So, if you can identify that shared need within a, ultimately it's a levered community, right? Is a community that has a need that it needs to be solved. If you can figure that out, then you have a levered position to solve that. But you need to also consider, well, if you're unable to share that need itself, are you the best person to try and solve it? And if you're not, you should probably try and look to someone who can and bring them in, or just not do it, and then look elsewhere. But in any case, you found some sort of idea, and so you want to develop that. You want to figure that out. So let's go to the next slide. So, well, the first thing is you need to figure out, well, who are these groups of people, right? You should really develop your user profiles. And what does that mean? That means, interviews, that means listening, that means try to think abstractly, put yourself out of your position, because you as a developer do not think like me, who comes more from a design background. We may have some shared ways of thinking, but we also have a different way of communicating. And so then how do we understand that user together? Well, you can simply just make have picture of someone, or just just like an abstracted picture, and then just start writing down like, okay, well, what does their daily life look like? Okay, well, they do this, they do this, they do this. Okay, well, what are their income sources? Okay, well, they do, obviously it'll depend on what you're working with, but you're trying to make a user profile. You're trying to, because here's a parable. If you were to write a story, right? If you're a writer and you're writing a story, and you're filling the character with just people that you know, or just people that are in your head, it's likely going to look a lot similar to yourself than a rich and diverse user set. So it's really important to try and think about diversity in that, especially diversity within the smaller niche community that you're building towards. So there's a lot that goes into that, but you really want to consider that. So generate user, think about your users and actually generate user profiles. And now look at like the other users that are providing in this idea, of course, the other users that maybe don't have those same kind of incentives. What do they look like? Do they care about this thing? Well, they probably don't. They're probably profit maximalists. So, okay, well, how do you provide, are you providing something for them? In this case, in this model, we are, because we want their money into this system. So we want to make sure that their profit maximalization is itched. So then more money can go into the pool, which can then fund more public good. And you want to identify what those users look like. Again, interviews, make a diverse, like different needs. Like maybe you're thinking like, well, how can capital be more efficient, right? How can, maybe there's mathematical things that can be solved here. Like look at Uniswap v3, right? They're thinking about how it can be more efficient for their users, and then who those users are and where their problems lie. So once you have identified sort of these user sets, you can start to break down the actual problem set and tackle it. So again, you want to look, listen, and observe till you get to this point. But now it's about, okay, well, what is already built? What is built with users? Can it be composable into your system? Can it be taken? Can it be copied? User inbound is important. You need to think about that. But then, you need to solve your community's needs. That's also important. So, you need to think about priority here and de-scope. Think about the whole idea and de-scope until you have the smallest, most minimal piece of that idea. And that's what you submit. That's ultimately what you're submitting. Is you want to think about how it interacts with the overall ecosystem, how it solves the needs for your users, and then how you can make it into something that's actionable, and then is more likely to get funding. And then from there, you can do it again and build on that system. And because you really do need your community and you need funding. So you need to get to those points as quickly as possible with a vision and a narrative that can then get you to more users, more funding, and to solving ultimately the problem set. Now, everyone has different opinions about this, but this is my view and one of the views that we take. So that's sort of my little talk, and we can kind of, I'd love to, talk more about this after this. But if you're interested about hearing, reading more, sign up to our newsletter. We have an article about MEV right now, NFT scaling, NFT indexes, and of course, some DeFi hacks. So yeah, I'm Jaye, and we try and secure the assets in your digital nations. And yes, Vora is actually an example of what they're trying to do here in this regard.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jay. And yeah, Jordan's joking. He wants to see Zora on Aurora. So that's a little point to the EVM on Near just launched last week. And so if you'd like to see any of the wonderful Ethereum experimentation coming up into the Near ecosystem, you could just, see an idea that might already be in existence and kind of port it over to a new community. Like on that same pathway, maybe there already is an idea that's fully developed, but there are certain barriers to entry for certain people, like fees being high or whatever. You'd like to port it over to a new system where you can solve some of those issues. But thank you so much, Dave. Anyone has any questions for Jay? I know there's a lot of info to unpack there. Please ask them in the chat. And after this session, we can kind of go back to the tables where I know a lot of people feel more comfortable kind of just asking questions in more of a casual setting. But I really love that slide you had, Jay, taking us through having like the generic users that are, usually have economic incentives. And I like that because those are usually available in every single community, whether it's a Web2, Web3 community, no matter where you are. There are probably a large number of people around you who are economically incentivized. And so with Web3 tech, so whether you come to Ethereum, whether you're on Near, there's probably going to be an AMM somewhere. You can probably launch a couple tokens with a couple different pairs, and you will probably have a group of people who will set up a trading bot and trade against your liquidity. And so it's pretty awesome to know that in this Web3 space, you will have that first set of like people there for you. And as you move forward, so with this hackathon, we're really trying to also incentivize the DAO side of things. So maybe you can think of, what tools can you use to govern, and then maybe you can work through some of the pieces that might be missing in the Near ecosystem. So you might have an AMM, but maybe you don't have a pool together yet. So, on Near, there is not a pool together yet. So maybe taking the pool together code, launching it on the EVM over a weekend could be a pretty fun project. And then you would have those missing pieces in a project that we know already would work out. CryptoFox is on Near, as Vandal is saying. If you could find their closed source code to also run that would be that would be great. But
I just
yeah.
wanted to say one thing to consider as well is, sometimes copying right out doesn't always necessarily work, right? You do have to consider, well, how most protocols, Near will also need like AMMs. Like they kind of need there's some basic tool sets that DeFi needs in order to operate. But as we get close, more and more to interoperability across chains and all these assets across chains, there's going to be a point at which the market could be flooded, and so you want to kind of move away from that, so you do want to consider how much is there. So what a good idea is a difficult question, and what seems like a good idea might be a good idea, but you don't have what in VC tech spaces call edge of the wedge, right? You don't have, you may not have a situation where there's enough inbound that's going to drive that idea, but also a way to be able to initiate that idea to create that growth. In the example that I provide, there's a lot of little nuances that I think are actually missing that I didn't share. For example, is like, well, how do you generate inbound on one side? How do you generate inbound on the other side? Like these are marketplaces. Mm-hmm. Thankfully, we've solved the two-sided marketplace problem via DeFi. But if you have an idea and it is about tokenomics, then solving that other side of the marketplace doesn't necessarily always work. And maybe it's not always a crypto economic model. So this is just a template to look at. But yeah, I would love to hear your guys' ideas, and I'd love to ideate here or at the table. I only have a limited time today, but yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So yeah, if there are no more questions, we will head back to the tables. I'll be at the getting started table. Jay, you can pop over to that table or any other table you see fit. People that are in attendance, please feel free to sit and ask Jay questions. If you have an idea that's kind of in the back of your mind, feel free to share. She might have some suggestions for you as well. So thank you, everyone, and thank you again, Jay.
Yeah, happy to be here. Thank you for the invite.
Of course.